Hey, I'm back. It must have been tough financially, huh? Sam smiled brightly, clearly in a good mood. He had left the family to live with his mistress, but here he was, returning home after a year. Just as I was preparing a meal with my in-laws for a family dinner, he acted as if nothing had happened, behaving as though his return was perfectly normal. But I ignored him completely. Not just me, my in-laws, Paul, and Marie all acted as if Sam wasn't even there. Hey, don't ignore me. I came back after all this time. Sam flustered, raised his voice, trying to demand attention, but I kept ignoring him. All right, shall we eat? I turned to everyone else, completely dismissing Sam, and invited them to begin dinner. How dare you ignore your husband? If that's how you want it, then divorce it is. Sam yelled furiously. Even then, we paid no attention to him, continuing to enjoy our meal together. Maria, how about we go out on the next holiday? Sure, let's take Grandma and Grandpa too. As we chatted, completely excluding Sam, he sat there glaring at us, his expression filled with resentment. I'm Kate, 28 years old. I started working at the city hall after graduating from college. And that's where I met Sam, who's 3 years older than me. Sam was a high-ranking employee at a major corporation, serving as the project planner for a collaborative initiative with the city. The first time I met him, he had an air of competence, and his refined features caught my eye. I fell for him instantly. On top of that, Sam's dedicated and earnest personality stood out. Even when we made unreasonable requests, he handled them without complaint, and I found myself increasingly drawn to him. As the project progressed, we often met for meetings, but as someone with a reserved personality, I couldn't muster the courage to express my feelings and kept them bottled up. Then one day, the project team decided to hold a social gathering. The thought of dining with Sam made me so happy that I may have been a little too excited. Kate, your thorough explanations have been a huge help to us, and your prompt responses, Sam, have been just as helpful to us. We started by complimenting each other's work, but soon our conversations turned personal. We discovered that we were both single, and neither of us had a significant other. I hope we both find someone special. Yeah, although it's hard to meet people with jobs like ours. As we chatted about trivial things, I found myself drinking more than usual. But I wasn't very good with alcohol, and by the end of the gathering, I was completely drunk. Are you all right? He gently supported me as I wobbled on my feet. I'm sorry, I think I had a bit too much to drink, I admitted, feeling embarrassed. I tried to make my way home on my own, but he insisted on walking me home since we lived in the same direction. He kept his arm around my shoulder the entire way, and I felt an odd sense of reassurance from his presence. Kate, would you mind going out with me? His sudden confession caught me off guard, but I thought he seemed dependable and capable of making me happy, so I agreed to date him. From then on, we started spending time together, and I grew fond of the childlike smile he'd show, so different from his professional demeanor at work. Even while we were dating, he often talked about his vision for the ideal family. He shared that his father, a strict businessman, had raised him with tough discipline. However, he also credited his father for never letting him experience embarrassment. Sam said he wanted to raise his own children with the same level of discipline. Hearing him talk about these things, I naturally began to imagine a future with him. After dating for about 3 years, one day, Kate, will you marry me? He proposed as we walked home from a movie theater, his face flushed with nervousness. I thought to myself, this man will always protect me, and we'll build a safe and secure home together. I said yes. Both my parents and Sam's were overjoyed. And the year after we married, our daughter Maria was born. I felt incredibly happy. At Sam's request, I quit my job when I became pregnant with Maria and became a full-time housewife. Sam's income from his job at a major corporation was more than enough for us to live comfortably, and I had no objections to the arrangement. But after Maria was born, Sam's behavior changed drastically. He used to come home every day without fail, but suddenly, he started coming home only once every 3 days. "Why don't you come home every day? Maria's crying at night keeps waking me up. I'm sleep deprived as it is with this demanding job. Cut me some slack. This is the best way to take care of you both." His excuses sounded convincing, but I suspected he simply wasn't interested in parenting. Even when he was home, he didn't talk to Maria or smile at her. To him, raising a child was solely the wife's responsibility. Still, as a stay-at-home mom, I tried to understand and support him. But parenting for the first time was a constant struggle for me. There were nights when no amount of soothing could stop Maria from crying, and I worried I might have a breakdown. If my parents had lived nearby, I would have asked for their help. But unfortunately, they lived more than 4 hours away by train. Should I ask Jane for advice? "I wouldn't do that if I were you," Sam said, discouraging me from turning to his parents. "Why not?" "Because you didn't give birth to a son. Mom and Dad are furious about it." I was deeply shocked. I had thought Sam's parents were happy about Maria's birth, but now I learned they were angry because she was a girl and had labeled me a failure as a daughter-in-law. Hearing that, I gave up on seeking help from his parents and resolved to face parenting Maria on my own. Then one day, Sam's friend Paul, who lived nearby, paid us a visit. "Sorry for dropping by unannounced. I found this drawing set while on a business trip and thought Maria might like it, so I couldn't resist picking it up for her." Paul was a year younger than Sam and had started a company during his college years that turned out to be a great success. Now he worked as the CEO of that company. Sam and Paul had met in college and seemed to get along remarkably well. Even after our marriage, Paul would occasionally stop by to visit us. "Is Sam helping out with parenting?" Paul's casual question caught me off guard, and before I knew it, tears were streaming down my face. Since Maria was born, Sam had stopped saying kind words to me, and he never gave any thought to her family anymore. I had been carrying this burden alone, unable to talk to anyone. So Paul's simple kindness overwhelmed me. Seeing me cry, Paul looked genuinely shocked, but he quietly listened to what I had to say. I told Paul everything about Sam's behavior since Maria's birth. "Unbelievable. Sam is just completely out of line." After I finished talking, Paul angrily defended me against Sam. "I'll have a word with Sam. But listen, you don't have to deal with this alone. You can tell me anything, anytime." Paul's words gave me so much comfort. From then on, he frequently checked in on me and Maria, making sure we were okay. It lightened my heart considerably. A few days later, Maria came down with a high fever. "Maria, are you okay? I'll call Dad, and we'll take you to the hospital." I called Sam over and over, but he didn't answer. With Maria's fever nearing 104 degrees Fahrenheit and her breathing labored, I couldn't wait any longer. I reluctantly called Paul. "Maria has a high fever, and I can't get in touch with Sam." Hearing my tearful explanation, Paul came right away and drove Maria and me to the hospital. The doctor diagnosed Maria with a viral infection and said that if we delayed any longer, it might have caused brain damage. I was relieved beyond words that Maria was safe. Thanks to Paul, Maria was okay, but anger toward Sam boiled inside me. I had not only called him but also sent WhatsApp messages, yet he hadn't returned my calls or even replied to my texts. Maria was in serious trouble. Didn't you care at all? I confronted him. I was working. What could I have done? Sam said, showing no remorse and prioritizing his job over Maria. You could have at least taken her to the hospital. You're her father. Hey, that's such a hassle to me. Besides, she's fine now, isn't she? That's all that matters. Sam didn't even try to listen to me. Instead, he brushed it off and went to sleep, saying he was tired. Feeling like he didn't care about Maria at all, I was heartbroken and ended up venting to Paul. Paul immediately said he was coming over and arrived soon after. Sam, this is outrageous. How can you ignore your daughter when she's suffering and not even check in? Paul directed his anger at Sam, who was lying in bed. Paul had shared with me before that he grew up in a single-parent household, raised by his mother. He was grateful to her, but admitted he had always longed for a father figure. Paul had vowed that when he became a father, he would never leave his children feeling abandoned. To him, Sam's behavior was unacceptable. A father's presence is special for a child. What the hell are you doing, Sam? Paul's words were full of passion, but Sam only looked at him with irritation. If you care so much, Paul, why don't you marry her and become Maria's dad? Sam smirked, his words dripping with sarcasm. Sam, do you even realize what you're saying? Shut up, I never asked for a kid. She decided to have Maria, so it's her job to raise her. Hearing those words, I felt a deep sadness. The happy life we had dreamed of before getting married was nowhere to be found. Looking at him now, I couldn't help but feel both anger and resentment toward him. Hearing him say that he never even wanted Maria made me realize that any remaining affection I had for him had completely vanished. That's enough. There's no point in talking to him anymore, I said. Feeling that nothing I said would ever make Sam understand, I stopped Paul and let go of any expectations I had for him. Sometime later, Sam announced that he was being transferred to another city. How are we supposed to handle such a sudden transfer? I asked. You and Maria don't need to come. I live alone. I've already rented an apartment, he replied. To my shock, he had made the decision to move on his own without even discussing it with me. Still, living apart from Sam, who had no involvement in Maria's care, seemed like it might actually be better for me. Life without him turned out to be much easier, as it became routine for Maria and me to spend time together. I naturally started thinking, I have to step up and take care of everything myself. But by the third month after Sam's transfer, the deposits into our shared account started to decrease significantly. The monthly allowance we were supposed to receive was cut drastically. Not knowing what was going on, I called him right away. I've had to cut back on your living expenses because I'm sending money to my parents, he explained. Sam claimed that his parents' factory was in financial trouble and that they needed his support. But what about Maria and me? We can't make it on this, I protested. Then get a job. And if things get tough, you can always rely on your own parents. I couldn't accept what Sam had said, but he hung up the phone abruptly, leaving me with no chance to argue. Not believing his explanation, I decided to consult Paul that evening. It's true that Sam's dad's factory is struggling. I don't know if he's really sending money to them, but it does seem like he cares about his parents. Maybe you should try trusting him, Paul suggested. Paul's words left me with no choice but to trust Sam, despite my doubts. Still, I had to find a way to support Maria and myself. I decided to take a part-time job at a nearby hardware store. Leaving young Maria at home while I went to work filled me with guilt, but I kept telling myself it was something I had to do to survive. While I worked, I arranged for Jane, who lived nearby, to come and look after Maria. However, it was clear that Jane didn't seem entirely pleased with the arrangement. "Are you out there having fun while leaving your little one with me?" When I returned from my part-time job, Jane greeted me with a sarcastic smile and a pointed remark. "Fun? Absolutely not. I was at work," I replied, trying to explain myself. But it was clear that Jane didn't believe me. "If Sam is earning money and now you're working too, you must be living quite comfortably. Why don't you pay me for taking care of your child?" Jane demanded payment in exchange for watching Maria, her tone dripping with annoyance. "That can't be right. Sam told me he's been sending money to you," I exclaimed in disbelief. "Sending money? What are you talking about? We're the ones giving Sam an allowance," Jane replied sharply. Jane and I exchanged stunned looks. "Jane, are you serious? Sam told me he cut our living expenses because he's sending money to you and Tom. That's why I had to take this job." We decided to compare our bank statements and realized neither of us was lying. It became clear there had been a massive misunderstanding, so Jane and I sat down to have a long conversation. "I'm sorry for doubting you, Kate," Jane admitted, apologizing sincerely. "I'm sorry, too, for not having a son," I said, believing that Jane's dissatisfaction with me leaving Maria with her was because Maria was a girl. "There's no need to apologize. Whether it's a boy or a girl, grandchildren are precious," Jane said with a gentle smile as she hugged Maria. "But Sam told me you and Tom were upset because I didn't have a boy," I explained. "That's absurd. We've never said anything like that," Jane replied, leaving me completely stunned. It turned out that everything Sam had told us was a lie. What is Sam thinking, telling us all these lies? Jane seemed exasperated with Sam's behavior. Just then, Paul rushed into the house, looking visibly alarmed. "Have you read this?" he asked, holding up a newspaper and pointing to an article. The headline stated that Sam's company had abolished mandatory transfers for employees with children. "If this is true, Sam should be coming back." "Right," I said, feeling a glimmer of hope that our life might return to normal. I immediately tried calling Sam to confirm, but his phone went straight to voicemail every time. Even when Jane tried calling him, there was no response. While we were all feeling frustrated, Maria wandered around the house, gathering scraps of paper for her drawing. But as she spread out one particular sheet, my heart skipped a beat. "Wait a minute," I exclaimed, hastily stopping Maria from drawing on the paper. Startled, she looked at me with tearful eyes. "I'm sorry for scaring you, sweetie. This paper isn't for drawing. Let's find another one, okay?" I handed Maria a fresh sheet and carefully unfolded the paper she had chosen. I laid it out in front of Jane and Paul, and both of them stared at it in shock. "What on earth is this?" Jane asked, her voice trembling. It was a divorce application, signed in Sam's handwriting. A tense silence filled the room as we tried to process the revelation. Months later, we arranged a family dinner and invited Sam's parents over. As I was preparing dinner, Sam showed up at the house for the first time in a year. "I'm home. The master of the house is back. You must have struggled financially without me, huh?" Sam walked in with a big grin, acting as though nothing had happened. "Oh, Paul and Mom are here too, I see," he said casually, sitting down as if it were the most natural thing in the world. "Hey, get me a beer," he commanded, as if I were still at his beck and call. But instead of acknowledging him, I poured a beer for Paul and handed it to him. I didn't serve him any food or even a cup of coffee. Neither his parents, Paul, nor Maria acknowledged Sam's presence. It was as if he wasn't even there. "Hey, don't ignore me. I came back after all this time." His voice grew louder, filled with frustration. but I continued to ignore him. "All right, let's eat," I said, addressing everyone but Sam. "How dare you ignore your husband? If that's how you want it, then it's divorce." He exploded in anger, shouting at the top of his lungs. I sighed, stood up, and walked to the bedroom. I returned with a bag filled with his belongings and silently shoved it into his hands. Then, without a word, I sat back down and resumed eating as if nothing had happened. "Hey, what's going on here? What's the meaning of this?" he shouted, looking completely flustered. But then his eyes fell on a photo frame on the shelf, and his expression twisted into a sinister smile. I see. So that's what this is about," he said smugly. The photo inside the frame showed me in a wedding dress, smiling alongside Paul and Maria. "You married my friend while I was away. Bigamy is illegal, you know," Sam declared, jumping to conclusions with a triumphant smirk on his face. I stood up again, this time retrieving the divorce papers. Without saying a word, I pressed them against his forehead and let them stick there. Sam's confidence faltered as he read the paper, his hands trembling slightly, but he quickly tried to regain his composure. "I never agreed to this divorce," he shouted defiantly. I didn't want to speak to him directly, so I sent him a message instead. In it, I explained how the divorce application Maria had been using as drawing paper had Sam's handwriting on it. Sam's face turned pale as he suddenly remembered the application he had filled out months ago when Maria had brought that paper to us. Jane, Paul, and I had all been shocked. Given Sam's previous behavior, it was clear that he was hiding something significant. At Paul's suggestion, I hired a private investigator he knew to look into Sam's activities. It didn't take long to discover that Sam was living with his mistress at his apartment in the city where he had been transferred. Suddenly, everything made sense: the missing living expenses, the lies he told both Jane and me. Without hesitation, I submitted the divorce application. But I came back, didn't I? "That means I'm not serious about divorce," Sam said smugly, as if his return absolved him of everything. "You only came back because your mistress dumped you," I replied, unable to hold back a laugh. "What are you talking about? I left my mistress because I wanted to come back to my family," Sam said, his excuse as pathetic as ever. But I already knew the truth. During the investigation into Sam, I discovered that his mistress was seeing another man in addition to him. She was clearly more interested in the other man, while Sam was nothing more than a source of money to her. The other man, however, had no idea that the mistress was living with Sam. So I contacted her directly and gave her an ultimatum. If she didn't end things with Sam, I would tell her boyfriend everything. Fearing the loss of her relationship with the man she truly cared about, the mistress quickly broke things off with Sam. As it turned out, all the money Sam had withheld from our household and the allowance he received from his parents had been spent on her. "That's why, Sam, I know all your lies," I declared. Sam's face twisted in frustration, clearly realizing he had no more excuses. "Do you think you can get away with doing something so selfish?" he shouted. "Selfish? The only selfish one here is you," I said firmly. What was he even trying to accomplish? Sam, desperate to defend himself, began insulting me, claiming that being cheated on was somehow my fault. "This is humiliating. You're my son, but I'm utterly ashamed of you," Tom said, looking at Sam with visible disappointment. "Take responsibility for your actions. And you'd better start looking for a new job," Jane added coldly, though her words still carried a trace of motherly concern. "A new job? What are you talking about?" Sam asked, panic creeping into his voice. "Sam, you're being fired," Jane replied bluntly. On the same day I confronted Sam's mistress, I also made a call to his company. I lodged a formal complaint, threatening to expose them for transferring a father with young children, a clear violation of their own family-friendly policies. The company, completely unaware of Sam's deception, had believed his story that the entire family had relocated with him. They were deeply apologetic and assured me that they had been misled by Sam's claims. To resolve the matter quietly, I struck a deal with them. I would not take the issue public if they agreed to terminate Sam's employment, eager to protect their reputation and enhance their public image. The company quickly accepted my terms. "No, I'm getting fired." Sam's face turned pale as the weight of everything came crashing down on him. In his desperation, he turned to Maria and tried to play the victim. "Maria, you're a sweet girl. You wouldn't let them throw me out, would you?" Sam seemed to think Maria would side with him, either out of affection or because he had no other options left. "Who are you?" Maria asked, her small voice cutting through the tension. She backed away from him slightly, her face showing fear. Maria didn't even recognize him as her father. He had barely been home since her birth. Her reaction was entirely natural. "Dad, this man is scary," Maria said, clinging to Paul, whom she had always called Dad. "What? While I was away? All of you plotted against me." Sam spat, spewing insults as he struggled to maintain any semblance of control. Neither Paul, Maria, nor I acknowledged his words. Instead, we calmly resumed our dinner. "Maria, how about we go out together on the next holiday?" I asked, ignoring Sam completely. "Yeah, let's invite Grandma and Grandpa too." Sam coldly stared at us as we continued to talk, ignoring him entirely. "Can Tom and I join as well?" Jane asked. "Of course, it'll be more fun with everyone," Maria exclaimed happily. They also ignored Sam and enjoyed chatting with Maria instead. Paul had helped Tom and Jane find a new home and jobs suited to their age after Tom's factory was shut down, cutting off their income. "Thanks to you and Paul, we've been saved. Kate, I'm so sorry for all the pain we caused you," Jane said, apologizing sincerely. Both Jane and Tom apologized multiple times, and I decided that while I would cut ties with Sam, I would maintain a relationship with his parents. "You'll all regret this." Sam, with a frustrated expression, stole a bite of my steak and stormed out of the house. I felt no sympathy for him. He had done nothing but lie to everyone and act selfishly, neglecting his responsibilities as a husband and failing so completely as a father that his own daughter didn't even recognize him. For me, there was no reason to stop him from leaving. Taking responsibility for my own happiness, I decided to enjoy the meal with my family. A few days later, Paul, Maria, and I went on a honeymoon. Paul managed to arrange a week off work, and we embarked on a wonderful trip together. However, when we returned home in high spirits, we found the house completely ransacked. "Who could have done this?" I exclaimed in shock. Paul gently embraced me, reassuring me and Maria as we tried to process what had happened. The police arrived and began their investigation. They found Sam's fingerprints on a drawer in the newly purchased chest we had gotten after Paul and I remarried. He was promptly issued a warrant for breaking and entering and theft. With nowhere else to go, Sam tried to seek refuge at his former in-laws' home, only to find it sold after Tom and Jane had moved. A new family now lived there. Sam, undeterred, took up residence in the backyard shed without the current homeowner's permission. For a while, he survived by stealing vegetables from their garden, but he was eventually caught by the children of the house, who hit him in the face with a soccer ball. The ball struck him hard enough to knock him unconscious. giving the police enough time to arrive and arrest him. Meanwhile, I have been building a happy life with Paul and Maria. Tom and Jane regularly visit us and bring vegetables from their own garden, and our relationship remains close. Paul treats Maria like his own daughter, and she adores him, often joining him on camping trips. As for Sam, while he was initially granted probation after his conviction, he couldn't find work or housing. Instead of apologizing to his parents or attempting to make amends, he reverted to theft. This time, being caught during his probation led to his incarceration. Reflecting on everything, I couldn't help but think how pathetic it was to have met such a man. But as I sat with my loving family, I vowed to cherish the happiness I now had and move forward with my life.
If you can't listen to your husband, it's divorce, understand? I sighed quietly, making sure my husband didn't notice. I used to adore him, but now, in just a few weeks, I've come to despise him. My name is Birch. I'm a 42-year-old housewife and web designer. I used to work for a company, but I went independent 2 years ago. It's only recently that my business has started to take off. I met my husband, Anvil, through work. He specifically requested my design services, saying he was impressed with my work. We have been married for 5 years. We married late, so my in-laws don't pressure us about having children. I was already of advanced maternal age when we married, so I got checked, and there were no issues. I asked my husband to get tested too, but he refused, so I don't know about him. But his words, "I just need you," were enough, and we left it to nature. Kind in-laws and brother-in-law, and my husband. Our relationship with his family was good, I thought. After marriage, my husband started working late on weekdays. Yet, his salary didn't change. I suspected infidelity at one point. But his attitude towards me didn't change, and there was nothing suspicious on his phone, so I thought maybe he found a place to relax without telling me. 2 years ago, when I started working remotely, Anvil's attitude began to change. Household chores, which were split 50-50, now fell 90% on me. He even started belittling my job. Worse, he said I'm no different from a housewife. The last straw was our weekly visits to his parents' house. Originally, we used to stay overnight at my in-laws' house once a month. That was at Anvil's earnest request, and I didn't mind it at all. But as soon as I started working remotely, what was once a monthly visit became every 2 weeks, and now, every weekend this month. Hey, can we just relax at home next weekend for a change? What are you talking about? You have it easy as a housewife, so you should properly attend to my parents' house. What are you talking about? I work too. I want to relax a bit on my days off. My words turned his face red with anger. Once it gets to this point, conversation is impossible. I sighed quietly to myself. My attitude seemed to displease him, and his nagging didn't stop. What an unfeeling wife you are. The worst. I was thinking about something else until my husband finally fell silent, satisfied. It was 2 years ago that his abnormal attachment to his parents became apparent. It happened when his brother remarried and brought his new wife home. We had already been visiting every 2 months, but the frequency clearly increased. For these visits, my husband would lounge in the living room, and I would be swamped with housework and chores. Still, seeing my husband in a good mood, I told myself that being filial was important. My husband would beam with genuine happiness when my in-laws expressed their gratitude to me, so I knew he craved approval. Despite this, I continued to love him unchanged. Though he rarely showed it, the occasional words of gratitude made me believe he valued me as much as his parents. But a phone call from home made me realize I was wrong. Abby, he failed a medical test recently, and they found cancer. I gasped at the news that Dad had been diagnosed with cancer. He had blood in his stool during a workplace health check and was advised to get a re-examination. The re-examination indicated a high likelihood of a malignant tumor in his liver. I shivered at the thought of the worst-case scenario. Dad, who had never even caught a cold, was the epitome of health. Now, hearing about his sudden illness, he seemed shocked and downcast. I'm going to go back home for a bit. I'm worried about Mom. After hanging up with Mom, I suddenly remembered that we were supposed to visit my in-laws the next day. It's an emergency, so surely my husband would understand. But his response to my explanation was unexpected. What about Mom's ride tomorrow? Sorry, but can't you do it? Huh? You made that promise, right? Are you breaking it? You know I'm busy helping Dad. My father-in-law's help usually involves weeding or cleaning the storage. Missing his mother's ride should not be a problem. Yet my husband insisted that I go for the visit to do these tasks. There wasn't a hint of concern for my dad in his reply. I'm not talking about forever, just tomorrow, please. I almost shouted in anger at my husband, but I held it back and pleaded awkwardly. Right now, getting to Dad as quickly as possible was what mattered. No way. Lately, my parents haven't been happy about our visits. It must be because of you. I won't stand for it if my reputation suffers. In recent months, my in-laws had started showing complex emotions when we visited. It was because they couldn't meet their grandchild, born to my brother-in-law and his wife. My sister-in-law, younger than my brother-in-law, seems to have a good relationship with my in-laws. But she's not fond of my husband, so when we visit, they stay away from their parents' house. Because they live in an area that requires a car, she can only visit on weekends when my brother-in-law is present. I heard that she does try to invite the in-laws to her house, but they're frustrated about not seeing their grandchild as they wish. It's because when we visit, my sister-in-law finds it hard to come, so they miss their grandchild. Huh? All this fuss just because they can't see a baby that's only 6 months old? A crying, tiny thing compared to me, who's more useful? I was stunned by my husband's words, competing with a 6-month-old nephew. An adult, married son and a grandchild not even a year old. It's clear as day which one would be more cherished. Every visit, he just lies around in the living room, eats 3 meals a day, increases the laundry, and does a little bit of help. There's no way they would find him more adorable than their grandchild. Sensing my thoughts from my expression, my husband got up huffily and headed towards the bookshelf. Then he took out a piece of paper from his bag and laid it on the table. It was a divorce application. Anyway, we're going as planned tomorrow. If you can't listen to your husband, it's divorce, you know. He confidently presented the paper, which already had his signature and stamp on it. Wait, are you serious? This is a terrible joke. I didn't want to use this, but you've been too cheeky lately for just a housewife. Complaining about wanting breaks and all. I felt dizzy with his selfish reasoning. After all, it was he who wanted to visit his parents, and I just went along. Is it so wrong for me to want a break sometimes, after doing housework and working on weekdays, then more housework at your parents' place on weekends? Normally, a wife should suggest visiting her in-laws. If I didn't say anything, you wouldn't, right? It's natural for my parents to feel uncomfortable watching you. I was furious at how he had exploited me these past 2 years. I wanted to punch his smirking face, but clenched my fists and held back. Arguing now would only delay my return to my parents' house. Anyway, I'm going to my parents. I'm worried about Mom. My words seemed unexpected to him. He stared at me, face turning red. So, you mean you can't listen to your husband? It's divorce then, okay? I sighed without him noticing. The sight of him, unable to back down from his own words, was ridiculous. I wondered why I ever liked such a man. So, you're serious? All right, I get it. There's no other way, right? Realizing arguing further was pointless, I pretended to accept it. If I acted meekly while holding the divorce papers, my husband would look at me with a creepy, smug smile. Then, in an exaggerated manner, he stood up and patted my head. I resisted the urge to shake him off, and he, misunderstanding, went to the bedroom, looking satisfied. I immediately called Mom and told her about the divorce. She was shocked, but, after hearing the story, scolded me for not telling her sooner and urged me to come back quickly. After hanging up, I went to the bedroom. My husband was snoring, lights on. The snoring I once found cute now repulsed me. The man I loved so much, now just a subject of my loathing. I wondered if I was heartless, but then realized that such a thoughtless marriage was unnecessary. The next morning, I quietly left the house with my packed luggage and the divorce application. Knowing that the municipal office accepted documents on weekends, I stopped by to submit the fully completed divorce application. Then, I headed to my parents' house by train, meeting Mom and going to the hospital. The doctor had called Mom about Dad's illness. I braced myself, thinking it might be a terminal diagnosis, but thankfully, Dad's cancer hasn't spread and was operable. He would lose part of his liver, but it wouldn't hinder his daily life, and he could return to normal life with regular checkups. Relieved by the doctor's explanation, Mom and I went back home. At home, I told Dad about his condition and my divorce. Dad was furious at my husband and almost stormed out, but Mom and I quickly stopped him. I could finally see through him because of you, Dad. Thank you. Hearing that, Dad scratched his cheek, not entirely displeased. Mom and I exchanged smiles at his reaction. I told Dad I would visit him in the hospital since I would be staying at home for a while. He insisted that I stay as long as I wanted, making me cry happily. Remembering my phone was off, I turned it on. Ignoring the countless calls from my ex-husband, I saw a message from my sister-in-law, Gunnel, on WhatsApp. It was a message of concern for my health, and a report that my ex-husband had disrupted plans to buy toys for her son with my mother-in-law. Reluctantly, I realized my ex-husband was genuinely jealous of his 6-month-old nephew. The creepiness sent a chill down my spine. From the ex-sister-in-law's message, it seems I was reported to have stopped visiting due to ill health. However, since no details were given and my ex-mother-in-law's inquiries were evaded, my ex-sister-in-law found it strange and contacted me. However, I wouldn't be bothered if things were left as they are, but I owed it to my ex-in-laws, who had been kind to me, to at least say goodbye in person. So, I decided to visit their house. After explaining everything to my parents that night, I took the first flight to my ex-in-law's house the next morning. Seeing cars parked outside their house upon arrival, I sighed. It seems my ex-husband had stayed over at their place. Despite forcing his wife, who wanted a break, to improve his standing, he doesn't seem to care about the poor impression he leaves by not returning home when his wife is supposedly ill. When I rang the doorbell, there was a rush of footsteps, and my ex-husband appeared. It was just before noon. He glared at me with a demonic expression and yelled, "Where have you been all this time? You even turned off your phone." "Where?" As I said, I went back to my parents. Besides, I'm supposed to be ill, right? Are you okay shouting so loud that the whole house can hear? When I pointed this out politely, my ex-husband suddenly fell silent. "Anvil, what is this about?" A voice came from behind, and my ex-husband turned around fearfully. It was my ex-in-laws, who had come out in response to the bell. They both looked puzzled, having believed I was unwell. Sorry for the sudden visit. I wanted to take a moment to thank you for everything and say goodbye, as I'm getting divorced. As I bowed, my ex-in-laws looked at me in shock. Birch, I thought you were sick. And this sudden talk of divorce. Hey Birch, you're not still holding a grudge about the day before yesterday, are you? Stop joking around. My ex-husband's words prompted a reaction from my ex-in-laws. I smiled and explained the situation. Actually, my dad was diagnosed with cancer. It was sudden, so I apologize for not contacting you. When I asked Anvil if I could go back home to hear the doctor's explanation, he refused, saying he had to drive his mother and threatened me with divorce if I went. My ex-mother-in-law covered her mouth, shocked at how terrible this was. My ex-father-in-law was shaking with anger. Hey, I didn't say it like that, right? My ex-husband tried to deny my words, but my ex-father-in-law's glare silenced him. I was asked to prioritize my husband's parents even in an emergency, but I was worried about my dad and accepted the divorce to return home. Birch, how is your father's condition? Thank you for your concern. It seems that surgery is possible for his cancer. That's good to hear, my ex-in-laws said with relief, then turned cold glares towards my ex-husband. He stiffened but desperately tried to excuse himself. I wasn't serious. Birch had been lazy recently, not wanting to visit, so I wanted to motivate her. Oh, but I thought Birch wanted to visit. We were happy to have her since she was so keen. My ex-mother-in-law's words made my ex-husband go pale. No, but... He struggled to find a reason, but was cut off by my ex-father-in-law. So, you've been lying to us too. Forcing her to visit and then speaking like that. When you marry, your wife's parents become your family too. To prioritize us over her emergency situation is just wrong. It seems my ex-in-laws had been asking me to do housework and chores because my ex-husband told them I wanted to. Was he so desperate for their approval? I felt sick at his selfishness and need for validation. But it couldn't end here. He wasn't just victimizing me. So, as revenge against my ex-husband, I prepared something more. Another trap. My ex-husband tried to deny my words, but my ex-father-in-law's glare silenced him. What? Is that true? Yes. Gunnel also told me she's been treated terribly. Last night, when I thanked Gunnel for contacting me and told her about the divorce, she shared the mistreatment she'd received from my ex-husband. She was subjected to obscene comments about her appearance and constantly asked why she hadn't divorced yet. Furthermore, since her child was born, she was repeatedly told that the child was ugly, just a placeholder until her husband's own child arrived. This harassment, which started from the first visit for formal greetings, apparently continued yesterday. As soon as my ex-mother-in-law left the room, she was again asked why she hadn't divorced yet and told that she was already dismissed. Yes, right, Gunnel? Yes, exactly as Birch said. Gunnel's voice from my phone filled the quiet entrance hall. When I arrived at my ex-in-law's house, I had called my ex-brother-in-law's wife and put the call on speaker. Sniffling sounds and my ex-brother-in-law's comforting voice could be heard. I'm sorry, but I won't go there anymore to protect my wife and child. You did the same to my former sister-in-law, right? I confirmed it with her yesterday. You're the worst, not even a brother to me anymore. Don't ever contact us again. My ex-brother-in-law said all this in one breath and hung up. In the entrance hall, only the dial tone resonated, and my ex-in-laws looked at my ex-husband with cold stares. But it's true. She's just a woman who gave birth to a child. And it was the same with the previous wife. It's weird that she was praised and treated kindly. So I did it for Dad and Mom's happiness. You're the one who's wrong. We never asked for such things. My ex-father-in-law said coldly, dismissing my ex-husband's screams. Tears and snot all over his face, my ex-husband looked dumbfounded at my ex-father-in-law. If it was for us, then you're insane. My ex-mother-in-law added, and my ex-husband looked at her in disbelief. Then he suddenly turned to me with a pleading look. Hey, Birch. It's your fault. A wife should support her husband. Instead, you went against everything. But it's okay, right, Birch? We're a couple, right? Couples help each other, right? As my ex-husband grabbed my waist and spoke all at once, I smiled at him. If we were a couple, yes. But I filed the divorce papers yesterday. Now, we're complete strangers. My ex-husband froze for a few seconds, then turned pale as he realized the situation. I let go of his limp hands, said goodbye to my ex-in-laws without a glance at my ex-husband, and left. Later, I heard my ex-in-laws kicked him out and cut ties with him. Both the in-laws and my ex-brother-in-law's family moved away, and my ex-husband ended up completely alone. Apparently, he then targeted a female colleague, becoming a stalker, and recently it turned into a police matter. It turned out he had been stalking her even while married to me. His late returns home were because he was following that woman. After being sued for stalking, he was fired from his job. Unable to pay his apartment rent, he moved to a shabby place. The reason I know all this is Gunnel, my ex-sister-in-law. She regularly receives updates from acquaintances and eagerly shares them with me. Feeling guilty for not noticing her suffering, I apologized, but she just laughed, saying the fault was my ex-husband's. We have become close, occasionally having lunch together. She's expecting her second child, and I'm excited about what to get for the celebration. By the way, Dad's surgery was successful, and he returned home more energetic than ever. I moved back with my parents and continued my work, enjoying a happy life with them. Sharing housework with Mom allowed me to focus more on work, and my income increased. So, as a recovery celebration, I gifted a trip to my parents. I'm cleverly joining in as well. Hey, time to go. Coming! I picked a souvenir for my ex-sister-in-law and headed to join my parents. For a while, I want to live peacefully, doing my filial duties.